Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Tony, Rick, and everyone here at Toronto Metropolitan U. Welcome to tonight's SMPTE meeting. We are going to explore some of the experiences that some of us had at NAB just a short few weeks ago. I think most everyone's recovered. We're all a little out of practice in terms of spending a week in Vegas. But here we are. Tonight's sponsor is Applied Electronics. Thank you to Paul Steckley and the team at Applied. It was great to see all those familiar faces down there again this year and to get their support here at the section as well. It was arranged by me. Tonight, I'll be your moderator. We're going to go through each of the presenters' experience there. We're going to hold questions during the panel discussion session. So each person is going to come up, go through their experiences, and then we'll bring all 4 of the in-person presenters up, and we'll go from there. So there will be no breaks. If you are in the building, there's a mic set up. If you could go ask your question at the mic, that way everyone online can hear what you're saying. You'll be on camera. And then in the Zoom portal question box, please put your questions there and we'll ask them live here. So just a quick little recap. It was the 100th anniversary of NAB. One of the things that was cool for me as I guess one of the traditional vendors who bridge the cinema world and the broadcast sports world is that NAB's been putting a lot of investment into what they're calling the cinema world. They have a cine consortium. I'm a member of that, and we've been working with NAB, finding ways to bring that production community back. They did what they called Cine Central. They had a big space in the Central Hall where they had hands-on training. They were really pushing diversity and sustainability as a focus. They had a lot of great sessions in there. There was a Kodak film loading session where they were teaching people how to load 16 mil film into film cameras, standing room only, people all lined up around the booth to watch and see how do you load film. So some great stuff going on there. They're still doing more and more. In New York last year, they did a whole Cine Super 35 live session where they're really trying to bring that community back into these shows, which is great. For those of you that haven't been there in a while, the show starts on Sunday now. So when you're booking your ticket, it starts on Sunday. It's over on Wednesday. This year, the upper and lower South Halls were closed for renovations. Interestingly, the NAB folks tell us that next year the North Hall will be closed, and then the year after the Central Hall. So they're working through some renovations there. That West Hall was open and seemed to be busy. All the folks from the South Hall moved over there. That Tesla Loop was running over to the new Resort World Casino, which is where the Stardust was. So that was great. That's where we stayed, which was nice. You could hop in a Tesla and get a quick run over there, which was fun. So what was all the excitement about this year? Was it AI? Was it this 35 live, virtual, clouds, remote, LED volumes? Are they still relevant? IP workflows? Was there 3D? No, I didn't see any 3D. So with that, let's see what our presenters thought. First up, we're going to have Paul Steckley, followed by Roy Folcom, Justin Cathcart. Laura sadly isn't feeling well, but she sent a video in, and Genevieve as well. So first up, someone who is very well known to the SMPTE community, especially our section here in Toronto, Paul Steckley is president of Applied Electronics. He is now in his 40th year with the company. Paul is also the finance VP for SMPTE, a fellow of the society, and a past chair of the Toronto section. Paul is also the chair of the Americas Council for the IABM, which represents the interests of member companies in many aspects of the industry, including trade shows. And of course, Paul's fun fact is that his first NAB was in 1970 at the young age of 11, just a couple years before I was born. Paul, with that, thank you.
Yes, if you ask me how many NABs I've been to, the answer is I have no idea. So I used to go most years with my father, who had a company that distributed the Vinton line of camera support equipment throughout all of North America. So I was actually working the show in the late 1970s, taking a little bit of time off university. So IABM, for example, is one of the liaison organizations to NAB. If you see me afterwards, I can tell you some of the inside stuff about NAB. The show is 4 days this year. Not many people wanted it to be 4 days. Actually, one of the comments I heard a lot of this year, people have suddenly noticed and objected to the Sunday start. So that was one of the things I heard that I didn't put in my presentation. So just took a few pictures around. So expected a reduced footprint similar to 2022. So if those of you went to the 2022 NAB, it was sort of a carryover. A lot of the people didn't know whether the trade show would come back to the same force. What we were hearing in the industry is that a lot of people wanted the show to be smaller, shorter, and so when you look at some of the top 10 exhibitors like Viz, Avid, AJA, Grass Valley, among others, they were, and Imagine, they were 5 large companies that said that they would reduce their footprints going forward. And as we saw, they were actually much smaller booths. But then again, a lot of other companies, I saw Riedel had a very large booth, a new vendor we deal with called Disguise had a very large booth in the virtual production space. Ross claimed that they had the largest booth in the show. So it was, in Evertz, it was interesting to see that Evertz had dramatically increased their footprint as well. So, came to pass as AJA in the 5 companies I mentioned that were previously in the top 10 in terms of booth size, they did, but reduced their footprints. Imagine was quite dramatically reduced. It was a 10 by 30, and there was a lot of discussion about that over in the West Hall. But anyway, substantial increases from Telestream, Evertz, and Ross were clearly evident in the show. And what did I just do wrong? Near status quo from Sony, Blackmagic Design, and Canon. So Canon and Blackmagic are traditionally very large exhibitors. Some people said the Sony booth had shrunk a little bit, but it was still in its usual place at the back of the central hall. This was actually quite a hit. This was in the West Hall, in the North Hall, the NAB stage, and a lot of companies could buy time to exhibit there, and it was very, very well received. And some different sort of exhibitors like LG and their business solutions versus you would have expected LG to be touting their LED business for virtual production volumes and whatnot. So. And again, that was this Telestream booth, very large. AWS, obviously, making a big splash at the show. And if you're following AWS, they're hiring a lot of people out of the broadcast industry into AWS. The show layout, we hated it, and we're going to hate it even more next year. It was very hard to traverse. Some of us were running step apps. We're doing 18,000 to 22,000 steps a day. So I don't know how many miles that translates to, but for us on our side of the business, where we're going around with our customers to various of our vendors' booths, we don't have the luxury of arranging the schedule so that we do one hall on one day, one hall on the next day. By the time the 2024 layout, which defies a lot of people's logic, they're actually going to use the front half of the South Hall, the Central, and the West. And that will officially make it impossible to traverse in a day. As we say in our company, we'll go back, to use a football term, we'll go back into zone defense, and we'll each cover a specific hall. But it was completely brutal to try to get back and forth. I mean, NAB's always had that issue, but the West Hall is hard to get to. Yes, the Tesla thing is there, but by the time you line up to the Tesla thing, and by the time you walk from where it drops you off and picks you up, you virtually walk the entire distance. So I never quite got the point of the Tesla thing. I guess you can now take it into the Resorts World place, and that's apparently a better use of it. And one of the things we all notice is there's still plenty of empty spaces. If you've heard of my rants about NAB, I've always said it should be in the South Hall 3 days only, and everybody could fit there. At NAB New York, NAB actually limits the size of the booth you can have, so that people don't have to feel the competitive need to outspace each other. But anyways, my biggest impression of NAB was that I really didn't expect it, and a lot of us really didn't expect it to come back to the size of footprint that it was. We all thought it would be half to 3/5 the size forever. But like I say, as some of the traditional large companies reduced their footprints, others came in to replace them and with very large booths. So here's the show floor plan this year, and again, it was the West was highly criticized in 2022 because people were randomly thrown in there. If you were part of the cloud or transmission space or whatnot, it was kind of these vague criteria that landed you in the West Hall or not. And of course, one of the things NAB tries to do is they try to get marquee vendors to spread out so that some of the smaller vendors can get traffic. So that's an intentional thing. So when you see big name vendors, they're not all allowed to go into the same hall. NAB pushes them across the floor to floor space to attract people to the smaller booths in the sides. What's new? Pretty much nothing. One of the stated goals of many of the suppliers was that they would not wait anymore. Of course, everybody's been introducing and coming up with new products. So I wasn't aware of any vendor who was saying new at NAB. And of course, in the traditional format of the show, you had to have something new, or people would criticize, oh, there's nothing new at vendor X or Y and whatnot. So they very much now introduce things as they happen versus waiting for a trade show. It was interesting when we one of the things that has always plagued us at Applied is trying to figure out which customers are coming. So a trend that started happening a few years ago is that people wouldn't decide until the very last minute. This time we sent out the sales force to canvass the client base and said, who's going to NAB? And virtually everybody said they were going at the beginning of January. I thought, great, no waiting till 3 weeks before the show to find out who's going. And then they went up for travel approval, and then a ton of people didn't get travel approval. So there were some notable large, that isn't it. No, I was, yeah, I was saying, I used to help people design projectors, and I've never heard one make that noise.
Picking up some RF. Sorry, Paul. Volume down. Not gonna do it? Jeez, sorry, Paul.
So at 2.5 weeks before the show, we have these large customer dinners, and we panicked and greatly reduced the footprint of them in our restaurant commitments. And then a bunch of other people showed up at the last minute. So it was really, really hard to predict who was going, and obviously travel budgets are still tight. For sure, you did hear suppliers, exhibitors saying that the big networks in the US, for example, are sending a fraction of the people that they used to send. And frankly, most of those vendors loved it because the important people were there. And so a big 3-letter network out of New York would send 40 people, is now sending 4 to 8. So it's people did notice that that the show is fewer people but higher quality. Although with none of us expected it to be the 60,000+ that the show attendance claimed. So anyways, you did see kind of the mood was a little bit different. It was a transition from product discussion to a meeting place. So many presence booth layouts. So there were, for example, Grass Valley was quite notable in that they had virtually no physical equipment on their booth. So some people have made that decision. So really we're starting to see the show as more of a meet and greet type of atmosphere than the hard business that was done at it in the past. So, and one of the things is our business continues to transition to software, and software doesn't take much space. So, so one of the biggest complaints about NAB, and I guess Verizon brought in a 5G truck, but you could be charged, some booths pay over $100,000 for internet access at the show, and it's very, very poor. So in the IABM, when we're canvassing our members and what do you need to see change at trade shows, they all said, look, we're showing cloud deployments and our product looks bad if it doesn't function well. And so that's one of the, the bigger complaints. There's talk about IBC, since the IBC footprint is much smaller, that a 5G truck parked in a parking lot may be the way to go. And they're saying that within a couple of years, for example, the 5G coverage in Amsterdam, because it's a physically smaller place, will be good enough that they can probably just use the public 5G. So that's a major source of revenue for NAB. The dress code. I remember, so I'm a tall mutant person, and I remember buying $2,000 custom-made suits and panicking early in the new year to make sure, because I couldn't go to NAB wearing the same suits I wore last year, and I would go to a tailor and have 2 or 3 suits made every time for NAB. You wouldn't believe how many people I saw wearing flip-flops, Hawaiian shirts, shorts. One of the top guy at one of our big networks actually showed up to our dinner wearing a t-shirt with funny writing on it, flip-flops and shorts like we used to wear in gym class in the 70s. So, and it was, I saw 2 people in suits the entire time I was there. And even booths like Canon, that was one of the last companies that mandated that everybody had to wear a tie. They had dispensed with the ties. Talking to Grass Valley and Canon, they had petitioned management that next year they won't even wear jackets. And it claimed that they had a favorable response to that. So you really saw, and it didn't matter whether the person was an executive of a big network or just what some people refer to as the backpackers, people at NAB who have nothing to do with the broadcast business whatsoever. But anyways, that was it was really something to see how dressed down everybody was. So it's also a generational change. I mean, you know, nobody's wearing suits and ties to work. I'm going to pick on the one person wearing a tie here, but but anyways, that was I literally saw 2 ties the entire time I was at the show. What's next? IBC, for example, outperformed the financial performance of its budget by 50%. So one of the things that really has surprised us is that the shows are coming back. So NAB's betting on that. The show's going to have a larger footprint next year than it had this year. So a lot of us during the pandemic said the shows will never come back the way they were. They'll be smaller, shorter, and more sensible. If you're aware that IBC did listen to the exhibitors and did take a day off their show. So, but everybody's expecting, both IBC and NAB are expecting to outperform this year's performance next year. And yet marketing budgets overall continue to be reduced, and there's demand for lighter regional shows. And, you know, we're looking at some, you know, for example, IABM has got a deal with Avixa for some regional shows that they're testing and whatnot. NAB New York was incredibly successful because obviously people could travel locally, and anybody, say, east of Chicago could do it as a one-night trip and whatnot and free admission. So, but anyways, I think that was the, again, finishing where I started off, the biggest impression was that the show came back to such a large footprint that nobody predicted. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Paul. I couldn't agree more. Oh, your final slide, Paul.
Oh, yes, there's always something really stupid in NAB, and it's usually a camera boom on a car. So that's a Ferrari 308, if you remember the Magnum PI series. And somebody had desecrated, because that car was almost certainly made red. And they had not only had painted it green, they put a big camera boom on the like they'd really use it. So.
Yeah, and Paul, I couldn't agree with you more relative to the quality of the people that were there, and the volume of people was fantastic from an exhibitor perspective, and the internet at the show was awful because we're one of the ones that paid a lot of money and were sadly disappointed. Yeah, and we were doing camera to cloud stuff between us and Adobe, so we needed to have connectivity between Central and West Hall, which was a challenge. So next up, Roy Fulcom with Synesys We'd like to welcome Roy. Roy was raised in Creston, BC, and graduated from SAIT in 1985. He began his career, so you weren't at NAB in the 70s with Paul, I don't think. He began his career as maintenance tech, working at Canadian broadcast facilities, City TV, Much Music, Chuck TV in Victoria, and in 1989 became chief engineer of Post Haste Video in Vancouver. Roy has worked for 35 years in both sales and technical roles within the media industry. In 2014, he began working as a strategic account manager in the US for Grass Valley. Recent roles include VP Sales North America for Embryonics and VP Sales Americas for Tag Video Systems. Currently works for Cineasys and lives in Guelph with his wife and son. Roy?
I feel like I gave you a reading assignment, but I was tempted to just submit my bio and say Roy Folk when he's old, because there are, whenever the 1980s are referred to. Make sure I get this right. Pardon me. Thank you and good evening, everyone. My friend gives away what I think was the most important and consequential thing at NAB. Put another way, this presentation is brought to you by the letter A and the letter I. Although I'm not only going to talk about AI, I'll be talking about other things and highlighting some interesting solutions. I'll go through what I'm told. I love being able to talk to a bunch of wise customers. And so I'll go through the big things according to the wise people that I get the pleasure of talking to. I'll go through the applications of AI, consensus opinions of wise people, spotlight on a few select companies, and I have the pleasure of spotlighting a few Canadian companies within that group also, and new ways to do things, which I think was a bit of a theme, and I'll say maybe not brand new, but incrementally new, and then a conclusion. So the big things, AI, ML, cloud, VR, the R's, VR, AR, XR, MR, direct-to-consumer streamed ad-supported content. So there had been a movement towards subscription-based content delivery to consumer. That pendulum seems to be swinging back. Young people want free content and they want ad-supported content. They want mobile content. So fast channels and such feeding the OTT. So use of public internet, maybe doesn't sound exciting, but I think significant. Use of the public internet as a transport for production, contribution, and distribution enabled by SRT and RIST, and then geographically dispersed work teams. A trend that's been going on, certainly instigated by COVID, but continuing and seems here to stay and enabled by cloud as well. So getting into AI, and I'm not going to be an AI cheerleader in this, right? I'm gonna talk about what's interesting with AI, but also some of the what I would call red flags, things that make me nervous, and I'll get into that a bit. So listed here are a number of functions, jobs, people we all know. Some of you do these functions. Talked about openly at NAB are how AI is starting to replace these jobs and will continue to replace these jobs. So camera operators, editing, graphics design, graphics generation, writing, personalized news feeds, music composition, dynamic ad insertion, metadata creation, speech to text for captioning, dubbing, content management, dialogue replacement, and sports commentary. So a big part of what we do and what people do in our industry and things that will be affected by AI, right? And what stands out to me, you'll notice, some of these, a large portion of these are creative jobs, right? So AI is now moving into the realm of creativity in our industry. And those are also jobs, again, some of us do those jobs, some of us have friends, many of us have friends doing these jobs. These are jobs people love doing, right? Creative jobs that people love doing in our industry. So the implications of AI, the consequences of AI in our industry are, I would say, massive. a prediction from a wise person, and I ran this past a number of people at NB, is that 90% of editing jobs will be replaced by AI within 5 years. So even if the 90 is wrong, right? Even if it's 80, 70, 60, that's still a massive implication, right? Of what AI can do and the effects that it will have on our industry. So allow me to be a little bit philosophical for a moment. So tech and media inventions have been mimicking human function for a century and a half. Microphones mimic human ears. Cameras mimic human eyes. Computers mimic human brains, and including memory. We are moving into an era where technology is mimicking the most precious of human functions: creativity, craft, and gosh, even relationships, right? There's now AI companions hitting the market. So again, massive implications. The implications are staggering and frightening. And I mean, I'll expose my own internal turmoil, right? I love technology. So I'm very interested in the AI solutions. I'm going to now be talking about some of them, but I worry how it's all going to unfold, not just in our industry, but across society. It's a big subject. All right. This is one quote that I thought was relevant. Social media was the first contact between AI and humanity lost. So a bunch to think about. I hope you'll all, after we're done, offer your comments, thoughts on this subject. And that I want to make sure I credit that. This is Yuval Harari, one of my favorite writers, Tristan Harrison, Asa Raskin. Now, moving on, consensus opinions of wise people. AI is going to change our industry dramatically. Cloud-based live production is not yet ready for tier 1 sports. It is ready for tier 2 and tier 3 sports. Cloud-based playout is fully ready for, and now the only sensible way to do playout. Cloud-based workflows have significant benefits, but sometimes a hybrid approach is still required for both cloud and on-prem. Ad-supported models for delivery are back. Public internet, again, repeating some of my prettier statements, but public internet, a viable transport for production, contribution, and distribution enabled by SRT and RIS. Now a spotlight on a few companies. And again, I'm gonna now appear like a hypocrite. I just talked about the dangers of AI, and I highlight a couple of AI companies, and then of course, a few companies not AI. Flawless AI, interested, a quick show of hands. Anybody familiar with this company? I wanted to bring in their, try to play their demo reel, but I was worried I wouldn't do it justice. But please go check it out. I've got a few screenshots here. So this company uses AI to do dialogue replacement and language translation, so dubbing in the film industry. They can use, you have an English version of a film, for instance. You want a Spanish version. You record the Spanish dialogue, uses AI to go in, manipulate pixel by pixel everything around the mouths of the actors and reproduce the lip movements of all the other languages. Okay? It's remarkable, and it looks great. So I encourage you to go on to that website. So different languages and dubbing is one application. I'm gonna trip and fall over the cables here. Language is one application, and dialogue replacement certainly. To change dialogue in post-production used to involve reshoots. Now you could just record the audio, let this thing do its thing, and come up with the appropriate lip movement, pixel by pixel, for the new dialogue. So performance tracking, 3D modeling, awarded by Time Magazine, one of the best inventions of 2021. EVS Extra Motion. So this is an interesting application for slow motion. To do super slow-mo on tier 1 sports, you would use high-speed, many of you know this, I'm sure, use high-speed cameras shooting at 180 frames per second or 240. You then play it back at 30, and now it's slow, but you've got that temporal resolution that makes it smooth, right? Now, with this EVS feature that was introduced, extra motion, you have the ability to use a standard camera shooting at 30 or 60, and it will interpolate frames, so you can then create 180 frames per second out of the original 30 or 60. Then you can play it in slow motion and still have that smooth motion. Interesting. But I'll say it was successful, created a lot of buzz. I'll say though, the ability to do interpolated frames is not new, right? That's been around, I think, 20 years. Teranix maybe being one of the first companies that did it. But a smart introduction and a good use. We used to, in the old days, we didn't have high-speed cameras. You'd be recording at 30 and then slowing it down and then repeating all these frames, and the motion would look horrible, right? So a successful introduction. Magnify, Magnify.ai. This is one of the companies doing AI sports highlights, right? So many of the editing jobs involve editing sports packages, sports highlights. This has the ability to use AI, go in, analyze the content, create the edited sports highlight packages without human involvement, right? So pretty significant. The Fawn Group. This I saw, this was an interesting group, but also I saw this as a bit of a trend. The Fawn Group, really interesting suite of companies, and I saw this in a couple places, companies putting together a suite of companies, a suite of solutions to do entire workflows for content creation. So this company based in Norway put together these interesting companies, and they focus as well on news. So a new way to do news, using cloud, using SaaS, using web applications, and rather than the traditional newsroom computer systems like iNews and ENPS, right? They now have their own tool called Dina. So this is I'll say a new way, using modern tools to do news. Mimir is the name for their asset management system. Dina, as I mentioned, the newsroom computer system. So Mimir, Dina, really interesting stuff, and a crowded booth. Now, I get to highlight a Toronto company, a small Toronto company. This was my favorite demo of the show. Brian Chaley, who many of you may know, his company called Streamwell had a tiny booth at the back of the West Hall, and it's so great and refreshing to be able to go to a booth and see the actual owner of the company and talk to them. But it's a really interesting solution for collaborative review of content. So using WebRTC, you can do delays as low, using the public internet, latency as low as 4 video frames. So private live streaming server combines professional quality of live stream, sub-second latency, and it's secure. Accepts all these formats, applications, including production, post-production, advertising, government. So hooray I always cheer for courageous people starting their own technology companies, particularly when they're from Toronto. Here's another one, not a new company here. Many of you know me, James Brooks and Drastic TV, but also an introduction of a collaborative workflow review software called Flowcaster. And this integrates with the Adobe suite, with Premiere directly. So a collaborative editing suite can then be shared out and streamed to remote customers and viewers. Also integrates with Avid, and with DaVinci Resolve as well. And they introduced a 2110 scope as well. LucidLink. LucidLink is a cloud storage solution that allows you to edit. And this, even though the content is in the cloud, it mounts on your desktop like a local drive, and you can edit as though it is local storage. They developed their own protocols to communicate with the cloud storage to make it operate seamlessly and efficiently, and as though it was local storage. Really impressive. And of course, for, again, collaborative workflows that span across the globe. Because the content is in the cloud, as soon as you make a change to it, then the change is viewable by everyone else that has access to that storage. Tag board, now a new way, I'm saying a new way a lot, a new way to do graphics, using, again, modern tools, cloud, HTML, web tools for sports, news, entertainment, cloud graphics, interactive, serving social media, a new company and a new way to do things. Backlight is another company that has a suite of companies for content creation and workflow. So again, asset management, Zype is a cloud playout provider, Wild Mocha, an editing platform. So another example of a suite of companies coming together to produce an entire workflow. And then also some production tools, script tools within the mix. XR Studios, I'm going to focus on one aspect of the AR and LED wall technology, and that's ghost frames. I didn't know this, maybe exposing some ignorance on my part, but because the LED walls have the ability to do 120 hertz, and you may be shooting, say, at 30, the displays now have the ability, and you can synchronize the shutter on the cameras with what's displayed on the LED walls. So a camera can be, you got to have 4 different cameras on set shooting and capturing 4 different backgrounds, right? Because you sequentially go through 4 different pictures and you synchronize the 4 different cameras to shoot the 4 different. So you could have one camera shooting a background scene with the subject in front. You could have another camera shooting a subject in front and a green screen behind them, because the frame they're synchronized with is a green screen. You could have another frame that has a motion capture grid, reference grid on it behind a subject, all at the same time, right? And then you could have a 4th camera where the scene is there, but the lighting is a little bit different. So really, I think fascinating stuff. And of course, that's just one aspect. There's a lot of interesting things going on in AR, VR, XR, the Unreal Engine and the real-time rendering and the in-camera video effects. But I just wanted to focus on that. I'm winding up for the conclusion here. So the Scandinavian presence I saw at NAB seemed to be pretty strong with Fawn Group, Backlight. Although Backlight's not a Scandinavian company, but iconic within their group is a Scandinavian company. And Cantimo, a MAM company. So new ways to do things. And again, as I said, maybe not brand new, but incrementally new or incrementally better, but new ways to do news, new ways to do graphics, new ways to do content creation, new ways to manage content, new ways to do storage, new ways to do sets, new ways to collaborate, new ways to do super slow-mo, new ways to distribute and consume media, and new ways to experience media. So I reflected for a long time trying to come up with an insightful conclusion, and drum roll, my conclusion is that AI is a big deal. So thank you very much. I'm eager to hear all of your opinions and comments.
Thank you very much, Roy. Just a quick housekeeping note for everyone. The people here at the university tell us that there's going to be a complete overhaul of this room. So some of the technological issues we're having will all be solved come September in our new season. Also, make sure you're keeping track of those questions. We're hoping for a real good panel discussion here at the end. So keep track of those, whether you're online or you're here in the room. Let's make sure we get those out in the open in a couple of short presentations. Up next, I think maybe Justin's first time at the mic here at a SMPTE meeting, I'm guessing, Justin Cathcart. Justin Cathcart works as a freelance virtual production supervisor, as head of virtual production at Dark Slope. He utilizes his many years of camera lighting, IT, and production knowledge, along with his motion capture and LED volume expertise to manage Dark Slope's virtual production stage and production pipelines. Most recently, Dark Slope partnered with NBCU to produce Babblebop, which launched May 4th, 2023. Welcome, Justin.
Mike, to everyone at home.
Excellent. Welcome everybody at home. So I'm talking about things here from a virtual production perspective. So I'm glad that you brought up Ghost Frame. I don't have that in my deck here, but it was super cool to see live. I picked the wrong way. It's technology that I've been aware of, so I kind of didn't put it in this deck. But you're right; it's like super cool to see live. And like he says, you can have basically the LED volume be a green screen. You can like throw multiple environments up there. And application for sports is great because you can have like different backgrounds based on different what do you call it? Different locations. So anyways, that's super cool tech. Also touching on AI in the virtual production space, there's a company called View that had a partnership with another AI company called Kubrick, which basically is actually, I think, in the back end using Midjourney, but it's creating 2.5D scenes based on basically your text input. So those didn't make the cut here, but just wanted to mention them. So the first thing I wanted to touch on here is watching several panels at NAB, kind of hung out at all the virtual production panels, and the SMPTE RIS on-set virtual production initiative was present at basically every kind of major place where virtual production was being talked about. We really need to get standards happening in this space, so it was exciting to see some development there. I was kind of there a few years back when the discussion began, so it's kind of great to actually see some progress moving forward, and so I'm joining the initiative as of today, actually. So things that they're tackling is this interoperability problem that we have in the virtual production space. All of these various camera manufacturers and camera tracking, color management, all these things need to have standardization in order to have a sane work environment. So that's something that I'm very passionate about, is having virtual production come to a point where things are just a little bit more stable, because things crash sometimes. There's some problems on set on occasion, and education is a big part of this whole program. So excited to join ranks and kind of preach the good word. So as far as innovations from the virtual production kind of side of things, one of the big things was like in the volumetric lighting space, RGBW panels and some image-based lighting systems. That were kind of the first time that I saw these in real life. So the first one being RGBW panels. Rowe and Brompton partnered together to at the Brompton booth to display the very first Rowe RGBW panels. And these are important in our space if we're like lighting talent with these panels. Right now you can see kind of on the far right-hand side, we have this spectrum that shows the traditional RGB panel, which is very spiky, and we have these kind of horrible magenta casts on talent. So adding this W, which does not stand for white, it stands for whatever. So you can throw amber, you can throw white in there, but it has the effect of essentially, eliminating these spikes, so we actually get a real yellow. So it's, right now we have the illusion of yellow with the green plus red, but adding this W gives us like a full spectrum. And I was lucky enough to hop in the booth, so you can kind of see the difference between the RGB and the RGBW. Kind of lit. They had 4 panels. There was literally 4 panels in existence. They're just starting to manufacture them now. So I was surrounded by these 4 panels, so you can kind of see the difference in the color rendition. That it doesn't seem huge on this, but when you're in, I assume anyways, when you're going to be in a giant LED volume, that the change is going to be significant. So next, image-based lighting system. So KinoFlow announced their KinoFlow Mimic. which effectively is similar type of technology to what we saw on the previous slide. This, as you can see here, is the Mimic booth. They have 4 mimics off to the side. And so the benefit of this is, again, having RGB WW lights that are effectively playing video on the scene, so you can kind of dynamically light your talent. And then there was also offerings from Quasar and Ari and Lightgear, kind of speaking to the same type of thing, image-based lighting, kind of volumetric lighting, that's, you know, frontal to your talent and not necessarily the LED wall that you're seeing behind you. And then some cool stuff that I thought was pretty interesting. The Sony SRD and Magic Box. So the Sony SRD, the spatial reality display, has been, I think, maybe out for a year or two, but it was my first time seeing it in person, and it actually has fantastic implications or uses in the virtual production space, namely, you know, virtual production scouting feels like a very natural use case for it, and for 3D artists. And what it does is effectively is scanning both of your eyes, so you're not wearing any sort of VR headset or wearing glasses, but the display itself is scanning each of your eyes and displaying 2 images. So what you see is like effectively like looking through a window, and it was pretty cool to see live. It's this image on the right is kind of gives you an idea as to what it looked like. It felt like literally you're looking through a window. So that was pretty neat to see. And then last was the Magic Box. So the Magic Box in the virtual production side of NAB was kind of all the rage. Everybody's like, you got to go see this thing. It's like basically LED volume on wheels, and it's essentially coming to sets, so you can add all these other locations. You can shoot car plates. As you can see here, we've got the car driving in. It's sitting on a turntable with a robotic camera arm, and on the far right-hand side, you can see on this beside the guy that's walking up there, who's actually the CEO, there's the control center that's off to the right-hand side. So yeah, we've got one more slide of some of the innards. So yeah, basically full wraparound of LED panels, and drive a car in there and you throw your driving plates up. They had another setup where they threw up a train facade. So essentially you can shoot all these multiple locations, bring the actual LED volume to the set, and that was kind of something that blew my mind. I was like, no, you're supposed to come to us so we should shoot multiple locations, but you can actually drive this to the set and yeah, add some more production value to your production. So that's it. Saw some other cool stuff. We'll talk about some cool things in the discussion here. So AI was one of the cool things that I want to talk more about. So when we have our panel discussion, I'll touch on that too.
Thank you very much. That's great. I totally missed that LED volume on wheels. That's new for me. Up next, we have Laura Machado Faria. She's a student here at TMU. Hopefully she's online watching. She's a little under the weather today, but she is an interdisciplinary performer, producer, and writer based in Toronto. Born and raised in Brazil, Laura has been living in Canada for over a decade. She is an alumnus to Sheridan College, Humber College, and Laura is currently a 4th-year student at TMU in RTA production, recipient of the 2019 Laura Beckstead Award for Community Development. Looking to specialize in broadcast radio and television, Laura cannot wait to charm the industry with her chaotic energy and Brazilian accent. What she has done is prepared a video of what her presentation was going to be, and we'll roll that now.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Laura. I am so sorry that I couldn't be there in person today. I'm a little sick, but you know, these are tough times and you can never be too responsible, you know. So here I am doing my presentation about my experience at NAB in 2023 with RTA. So a little bit about me. My name is Laura Machado Faria. I tend to go by Laura Faritos because it's easier to pronounce. I'm a fourth year media production student at TMU. And even though this was my first experience at NAB, it's definitely not going to be the last. And in fact, I think it is a shame that it was the first one, because considering all the connections and networking and even business insights I received in this trip, it makes me wonder where I would be today if I started going to this event in the first year. So that's definitely something I think first and second year media students should be doing like right away. I wish I could go back in time. I would like to take a moment to thank RTA for this wonderful experience and everything it brought me. You taught me that there are so many opportunities for me in this field, even though I used to think they were super limited. I used to think that because of my accent, I couldn't ever consider being on air. I thought that all of my job options were limited to behind the scenes broadcast options because I could never, and this trip made me realize that there's so many opportunities for me, and all it takes is some very hard work at networking. Networking is all there is. It makes a huge difference. So who knows? Maybe I would have spent a whole other year not networking if I didn't realize the importance of it due to this event, Walking around the exhibit to visit all of our sponsors was really fun, but it was easy to get lost. Everybody was walking super fast, and there was just so much to look at. And if you wanted to stop and take a picture or a video, or even just like pay attention quickly to something someone in a booth was talking about, you would turn around and the pack of highlighters that was the RTA group was gone, out of sight. So I definitely underestimated how I would be able to keep up with the pace. And as soon as I got to the event, I was like, oh no, I need caffeine. I will not keep up without caffeine. I was utterly impressed with all the different types of tech companies that sponsored us, and also with all the different like technology related booths that were set up. I don't know what I was expecting when I got my tickets to NIB, but I think I was imagining it to be more like a job fair for obvious jobs in TV and film. But there were a lot of non-obvious jobs that I never even thought about. I didn't understand that there was such a high demand for storage, just media storage, all these media storage businesses that get to charge so much because they're usually an afterthought. And by the time you think you need media storage, you've already spent millions on a production and you cannot afford to lose that. So that was crazy. That was an entire field. Like at first I thought I saw one company, but then I realized there was an entire niche of just media storage companies, niches of overlay graphics for broadcasts. I saw this one company where the entire gist was that sports media broadcasters could draw live. They could draw on a pad live as they're reviewing a game or whatever, and then that would just show up on screen. I thought that was so cool. But yeah, I thought it was really cool to see all the different types of technology-based booths. There were a lot of booths related to green screens, a lot of exhibits of just work around action shots, and there was a guy in a motorcycle with a green screen behind, and they were showing all the mechanics around doing a super cinematic shots of this man doing like a 360 with a motorcycle, and how you would get a camera behind you to do all of that. I saw booths about, anyway, lots of technology related things that I never considered were a thing, but lots of innovation stuff too that aren't that common in the industry now, but that should be common in about like a few years. I saw this one company that their entire business model was that when you do a scene in a green screen and you have like a lighting environment or whatever, that their scenes with the green screen are high quality ones because they have depth of field and automatic color correction. So instead of you having to do color correction and things like that in post-production, you just do it live to tape, like as you're shooting that. So like, I thought that was crazy. I never considered all these different sides of the business. But aside from walking around with the pack of highlighters, that was the RTA group, my time at NAB was about more than that. I went to roughly 4 conferences and 2 happy hours. The conferences I went to because I got a conference pass. I think I was the only student in my group that got a conference pass, but I think that like anyone who goes to NAB in the future years should also invest in a conference pass. Like, I thought that was totally worth it. I networked like an unstoppable hurricane. I just did the rounds in every one of those. Got a lot of business cards. Yeah, like I went to 2 conferences about radio, 1 conference about podcasts, 1 conference about audio storytelling in general, like audiobooks and things like that. And I went to a TV happy hour and a radio happy hour as well. All of these events were extremely valuable to me because I networked with people that I never would have met otherwise if I hadn't gotten those conference passes. So that was worth it for me. That was very much worth it. And speaking of valuable connections, I would also like to thank all of our sponsors for this experience, because both the sponsor dinners and the Great Canadian Suite offered me opportunities to form valuable connections that, again, I don't think I would have made those connections without this trip or without, the sponsorship to go to these things. Like, I don't know that I necessarily would have gone to the Great Canadian Suites if I had gone to the NAB by myself. But I'm very glad that I did, because I did meet some people that I intend to keep in touch with and possibly connect with next year when I go to NAB again, And even during the sponsor dinners, I had the chance to talk to RTA staff that I normally wouldn't really run across, like sports media staff. And anyway, it was just very valuable, and I'm very thankful that I did it. And I would also like to thank all of the RTA students and RTA staff that made me realize how antisocial I've been these past few years, and how that needs to change moving forward. Like, I thought I would be fine if I just minded my own business, but it turns out that if you want to do business in this business, you need to know people. So by minding my own business for these 4 years, it turns out that I'm about to graduate knowing no one. in a business that is all about connections. So again, had I joined RTA at NAB in my first year, maybe I would have learned that lesson 4 years ago. Could have spent at least 3 years networking with everyone, but you know, a lesson learned late is still better than a lesson never learned. Am I right? So thank you to everyone who made me realize the importance of socializing and networking to get anywhere in this field. And these are just some token pictures that I got from our sponsor events. You know, we have the drink ticket for Planet Hollywood, the very delicious ravioli dinner that I got at Grand Lux Cafe, and this cool pool at the Great Canadian Suite in the Flamingo. And yeah, I thought those were some fun tokens to keep around. And that's my presentation. Thank you for watching. Sorry, my voice has been very nasal. I did my best. And if you would like to keep up with my shenanigans via my socials, videos, and podcasts, feel free to follow me at Laura Faritos. It's kind of like Doritos, but Faria, Faritos. But that's it. Thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I hope everybody has a great time and a great rest of our meeting. Bye.
Wow. Laura, I hope you're watching online, and I can only imagine your energy when you're feeling well. That was fantastic. Wow. Hey, networking, connections, relationships, that's pretty good stuff. Yes. All right. Last up, another of the full students that attended from MTU, Genevieve Tai. Genevieve Tai is an incoming third-year student in the RTA media production at TMU. She currently works as a videographer and editor at the YBE Dance Company. She is interested in live performance and variety shows and aspires to become a director in multi-camera productions. In her free time, she enjoys playing badminton and exploring vintage markets with friends. Genevieve?
Hello. Okay. Hey everyone. Thanks so much for having me. And as you heard, I'm Genevieve, and today I'm here to talk to you about my experience as a student at NAB. So on this first day, we had the opportunity to meet David Grindle and Roberta Gorman, the Executive Director and Director of Membership at SMPTE. They really placed an emphasis on telling us that the future of the industry is in your hands. This one sentence really impacted the outlook that I had throughout our days at the NAB conference. As a student in this huge conference surrounded by people who are more experienced and knowledgeable than us, it's easy to feel like we don't have that much to bring to the table. But this one sentence really placed a responsibility on us, the students, as valuable members in the industry. It helped me to make the most out of my experience, coming in with the mindset of being there to learn everything, ask questions, and explore my interests. So here we are at the SMPTE booth, and at the bottom left there, you can see we're matching in the infamous bright yellow shirts with David and Roberta. These bright yellow shirts are going to become a recurring theme. So anyways, they encouraged us to let our voices be heard as the industry needs to hear our perspective because we're changing the way that things are done. And I think it was really important to hear that from people that we look up to like them. So as a group, we attended NAB for 3 days, and in the first 2 days, Rick would bring us around to a number of different booths, and we would get the opportunity to listen to what they had to tell us about their product and their company. Then we'd have the time to ourselves to explore and wander around. So 2 of the booths we visited specifically really stood out to me, and they're also connected to be what I found were 2 themes of the conference that I was really interested in, which were virtual productions and IP-based broadcasting. So first, the first thing that really interested me, which was already mentioned earlier, was the Kino Flow product Mimic 120. And we were fortunate enough to hear from their president, Frieder Hochheim. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. So from my understanding of it, it's basically a full spectrum image-based lighting tile, which mirrors video content while applying a very high tonal and color rendering range. So this means that it can convert an image into a light source with a strong light level output. It seamlessly creates realistic and fully integrated image, which is extremely useful in lighting talent and set elements in virtual productions. I just thought it was really fascinating that they were thinking out of the box in an innovative way like that. Like as a lighting company, they develop their own products that complement the shift in the industry's future to virtual productions. And the second was from DeGero, where we spoke to Kevin Fernandez, their chief revenue officer, and a few other staff members. They showed us their product, Ngo 3X, which was recently launched, and it's a mobile video transmitter which allows for a new level of flexibility for broadcast. From my understanding, it can transmit broadcast quality live video over IP networks while also recording video for later transfer at higher quality. And it can do it through cellular, Ethernet, or Wi-Fi in this small device that's just under 5 pounds. So in class, we learned about the different signal types and how they're sent, as well as like routing and patching. So it was really incredible to see it applied right in front of our very eyes and through such an advanced form of technology. And I'm just excited about how it'll make broadcast so much more convenient and efficient in the future. Something else that I think made our experience extremely unique was how our professors also brought us to booths which showcased products that they were interested in buying for us to use. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, if it's a spoiler or anything, but they wanted to see what we thought of it. And so those included products from Nanlite and Pixotope. So Nanlite had LED lights and accessories that we could use in our own like lighting projects, and Pixotope had a software-based solution of some type of augmented reality using the phone as a camera and source of tracking. So visiting these booths didn't only make me excited about the future of broadcasting in general, but also the future of RTA and our own facilities as centers of learning. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our professors and staff who came here and helped make this such a great experience for us. So Rick, Brian, Ryan, Finley, Zach, Dan, Chris, Max, and like the other staff members. Throughout this trip, I gained a deep appreciation for our professors and all that they do to give us the best opportunities to learn and be prepared for the industry. So they arranged sponsored dinners where we were able to talk to important people and like staff. And they also gave us networking opportunities such as the Canadian Suites, which was really important to me as like an introvert who kind of has trouble networking sometimes. And their passion for helping us really gave me a renewed sense of pride as a student in the RTA program. So to kind of end off, these are the big 5 takeaways from my experience at NAB. So first, the hands-on learning outside the classroom. I was able to learn so much more just by being in the environment and soaking it all in, asking questions and having things explained to me in different ways, and being able to see the products in use and sometimes even being able to try them out. So for example, I was able to try out the DJI Ronin 4D, this amazingly advanced cinematic camera with all its different features with the help and explanation from a staff member. That's just like an amazing opportunity that so many other students wouldn't be able to get. Second, I was also able to gain a deeper understanding of the current market trends and where the industry is heading, which I think was only possible by immersing myself in NAB. So for example, just wandering around the conference, I could clearly see that virtual productions were very big in the industry now and how they're being applied in both single camera and multi-camera environments. Third, life and career lessons are huge, and I was able to learn them from having one-on-one conversations with people who I looked up to, like my professors and producers, directors, and technicians that I was able to meet. Just by striking up a conversation, I could learn so much more about how they started their careers and what values and mindsets brought them to where they are now. And fourth, although everyone had their differences, we were all united in our passion for entertainment and media. Simply put, it was amazing to be around people who were excited about the things that I was excited about. The energy was just unmatched. And fifth, this circles back to what David and Roberta told us on the first day about how we're the future of the industry. And being at NAB, surrounded by all of it, gave me a renewed sense of excitement of what the future of media will become. Thank you.
All right, if we could have our 4 speakers come on up, we're going to get ready for some questions and answers now.
I just wanted to add one little element on behalf of the students and myself. We have 2 sponsors here of the event. One, SMPTE. Thank you, SMPTE and Toronto section, for being a major part of the event that the students went to. And number 2, somebody we never get to thank in person, Paul Stackley, who's been supporting the student venture every year. So Paul, thank you. So finally, I've got at least one student here to thank you with me. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, graduated. That's right. Thank you.
You know, it is an impressive sight for everyone that's at the show. When you see that sea of yellow shirts coming, you know exactly where they're from, and you get a little tingle of pride knowing that they're from here at TMU, and they're the homegrown future of what we're doing. So with that said, the mic is here. Please get up, ask some questions. I think Tony's got the questions coming from online. But while we wait for the first guys here, maybe let's explore a little bit around the AI, some of the thought-provoking comments that you made, Roy. Yeah. Well, maybe a little insight, just in terms of some of the potential negativity, or Genevieve, what you guys are saying. Is this something that scares you in any way, as the youth, in terms of AI?
Yeah, actually, I was talking to a bunch of my friends and my cousin who's in engineering, and we're all just kind of scared about what it'll become, especially in terms of the creative field. And I guess of a more for a more philosophical type of discussion, like you were mentioning, it's kind of it makes us kind of question at this point, what makes us human, and what can we do that artificial intelligence won't be able to do in the future. But that's kind of a really big and heavy question that I don't really have the answer to.
Let's get heavy right out of the gate.
Well, that was an excellent answer, though. I thought, yeah. Like I said, what disturbs me is the fact that AI is now doing the creative jobs, right? The music composition, the writing. I did hear there's now going to be one episode, I won't say what show, but an episode of a television show where the script was entirely written by ChatGPT. And I don't know if that's true, but it's possible. And people at NAB were talking about are using ChatGPT to write intros to shows, right? So
it's interesting. I was watching a panel not too long ago, and it was more around commercial production and dealing with the agency people dealing with the clients, and where they thought ChatGPT was great was it gave you that baseline, but it's when the client said, now make it pop. Can ChatGPT do that yet? Maybe not yet. But what can it not do? Maybe that's something to explore. What can AI not do? Justin.
One thing I do want it to do, and we'll talk about what it can't do, but please just, if it could do the rotoscoping, that would be great. That you can take the rotoscoping. But what can it not do? Well, I think, these large language models, I'm kind of surprised where we are. I honestly am thinking that we are at the place where I thought we would be in 2027. These large language models, I think they're they're removing some of the intelligence from it because they're worried about AI becoming sentient. It's not actually becoming sentient, but worried about these things. So they're removing some of the intelligence from these large language models. So I think that we're missing some of the things that are built into these models, but we're dumbing them down a little bit. And it can be creative, but we know that there's it could be creative, but it's not to the point yet where it's going to take our jobs. But it's a couple years out.
Everybody remembers that the Terminator series Skynet became aware in 2023. Actually, I think the adoption of AI is going to be something to watch. How quickly people actually adopt it, versus taking the creative side away. It's interesting because the systems that can auto-produce sports like hockey and soccer in particular, there are a few of them that came to market and they've since disappeared for lack of adoption. So EBS, for example, had one, and obviously they're banking a lot on the cloud-based slow-mo AI, but their sports AI, and we've asked where to go, and they just said, well, it's there if anybody wants it, but they're just not getting the commercial adoption yet. So that's the big thing is will it get adopted? Will people take the artistic pen away from themselves and give it to the machine?
And is the storytelling piece there, right? Can the AI, often it's the personalities that we're tuning in to watch, be it sports or dramatic or scripted television or whatever. So, can AI replace that?
Eventually, but not yet. One thing when you were talking about what can it not do, again, in the virtual production realm, it can't adequately produce 3D scenes because the data set is not big enough yet. And I think with these large language models, it's scraping the entire internet. So it's got, trillions of potential kind of connections it can make. But unfortunately, in the virtual production space, building 3D scenes, we're not quite there yet.
Just a matter of time, perhaps.
It was a matter of time for all of it, and just we need the data sets to be bigger.
A few you guys mentioned some different lighting products and things. Were there any wow displays? I'm thinking just of the almost done MSG Sphere that was out there, and what is that going to be? Was there anything on the show floor that wowed you guys from a display perspective?
Just from the volumetric lighting perspective, Tim Kang showed us a demo that's had one of the slides up there was from his talk, and so it wasn't physically on the floor, but he showed us some stuff behind the scenes that he was working on, where he's basically got quasar lights, surrounding him in a 360 to give hyper realistic lighting. I saw you at the Mimic 120 booth or at the KinoFlow booth. Do you want to talk about that?
I don't know, I feel like I didn't really know enough about the technical aspects. I was just kind of really mind blown. I was like, how can people think about something like that, and kind of execute it? And yeah, I just thought it was really fascinating. Yeah.
I have one. Sony did show an HDR display, a new one with a 4000 nit capability, and it accepted 2110 input. So that was impressive.
In the virtual production space, I think the systems and Transparency is one of our vendors, but this guy's the coordination, the systems that make it scene appropriate, so they can run the explosion can happen, and the lighting, overhead lighting, will be coordinated by the same thing that's making the back of the virtual set. And one of the things that's come up in the SMPTE RIS is that most of the production people still want to use conventional lighting. So how the conventional lighting is going to match with the LED lighting, matching with the virtual lighting produced by the set. So.
Yeah, there was Ari showed last year, and this year, who did I have up there? Ari Quasar and KinoFlow, I guess. But last year, Ari was demoing that at their virtual production booth. That pixel mapping, so that you can kind of get accurate lighting from orbiter and such.
Tony, I think we may have one from afar.
We do. 1, 2, 3. You're good. Okay. So Cliff writes, will the industry take affirmative action to regulate AI, or will allow the Wild West to exist before adding regulations? them?
That's a spicy
It's a
tidbit.
good, yeah, it's a good question.
Under what jurisdiction would it be regulated, I wonder? Where does it occur?
Yeah. And when he's asking the industry, I'm assuming he's meaning the media industry, I see it as more likely that there could be some government limitations on AI. Limiting our industry, I think we all know it's pretty tough to control our industry. So
Yeah,
I would
they
say
were saying before regulations, so the interim between now and before government regulates.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Will the industry allow the Wild West?
right. Yeah, I think it's going to be the Wild West.
And I think, yeah, much like kind of nations are having a difficult, there's like the petition to slow down AI from a couple of kind of thought leaders in that space. And it's just, when there's money on the line, essentially there's not going to be one party that agrees to like it, or a subset of companies that are going to agree to that, while everybody else runs off and improves their kind of their AI. So
I actually think it's going to be kind of out of scope of our industry. It'll have to come from somewhere else, and obviously the creation of fake content and incriminating content and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think there's a cohesive enough organization. I couldn't see the CRTC doing it anytime soon. It'll have to come from somewhere else.
On that topic, Paul, I do hope you're wrong, because on a serious topic on that, again, as an industry, society, and so forth, if we don't speak up our voice and set a limit, we never know where that line may be. My question to the group here is, and thank you very much for the presentations, love them. There was nothing talking about Physical Connect. I do remember previous NABs, we were talking about the latest and greatest IP technology, 2110, is SDI in general dead and so forth. None of that seemed to be there, along with control systems for it. Was there anything on that topic? While it was great to hear about AI, and if our underlord is listening, I pledge allegiance already. So, but if there's, was there anything on that kind of the physical connections that we also kind of live and thrive off of there?
Don't get me started. Actually, one of the reasons one of the reasons that I came back to SMPTE was to try to effectively correct some of the mistakes that we made early on in terms of the way the standard is being processed through different organizations. Probably the biggest thing that's being talked about is the IPMX format. So this is, it was intended for the AV industry, but I'm going to speculate that it's going to, and I should have actually, in hindsight, as soon as you asked that question, I thought I should have included something on IPMX. So it is a product that's come out of Ames. It's going through the VSF. We are trying to get it into SMPTE. You currently see it published as VSF 10-1 through 12. It was introduced just before, 2 days before the start of NAB, and there are apparently hundreds of inquiries about it. So it is intended to be, it runs on the 2110 framework. It'll be originally specified, but not limited to JPEG XS. Most people are saying it'll run between anywhere as down as low as 80 megabits up to 900 or so, but there's no upper or lower limit. It is going to mash together the AMWA and SMPTE specs. And a lot of us, to be blunt, there has been some abandonment of 2110 because it is so complex, it is so expensive, and so it is. If it looked like it was being de-emphasized versus when it was the show, it has. NDI has flown off the shelf, so to speak. And so IPMX has seen, because it will run on the 2110 framework, it will combine all of the AMWA stuff, and it'll be in one standard. I expect that the broadcasters are going to adopt it very, very quickly. NDI is 125 megabit old style DCT MPEG, so all of a sudden going up to very low latency. I think low latency JPEG XS, and I think in terms of remote news production, where you have similar to what we did in Global TV 15 years ago, where a studio in Vancouver does the news in Halifax. I think it'll enable all the remote production in sports and everything. So of all the things hiding at NAB, I think the IPMX format, and we'll see what happens in Infocom in June, but I think the IPMX format will come out gangbusters.
To answer one of your questions directly, SDI is not dead, but dying. And to maybe echo some of what Paul said, there are serious people planning serious large facilities using JPEG XS TR07, which is TS, right? But you don't get the complexity of 2110, all the PTP issues. So a simplification of some designs, and of course NDI is another viable alternative for some facilities too. So yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Ed?
Yeah, how you doing? Just disappointed some of you didn't come by my presentation about color management and virtual production. Specifically dealing with SMPTE, the fact that a lot of people don't have standards, people don't understand the fundamentals. So, for example, you mentioned XR Studios, they actually adopted HS Scope to do color management. The whole point is that the whole methodology of using the camera as the source to calibrate everything. You talked about image-based lighting. I know Tim very well. The problem is that this panel over here is all reflected lighting. As soon as I make that an image-based lighting, that now becomes a source. So there's a caveat there to it, right? So if all of a sudden dealing with fire, dealing with neon, that's fine. That's a light source going on from there. But that's one thing that I noted, actually, Ryan, of SMPTE, that essentially a lot of people in the virtual production end don't have the fundamentals of how the camera operates. There's a coddling of people from the film world and basically saying, oh, you don't have to worry about scopes and all that stuff. And this is the downside with SMPTE, is the fact that we're not going back to the fundamentals. We're not turning around saying, here's where the basics is. And that was basically the point that I was getting to. So there's a great deal of technology, but none of it is coordinated. And basically all of that comes back to SMPTE, coordinating that through standards, coordinating that through basically the fundamentals that we all knew. Things like it's an electronic image creator, right? And it's not film anymore. So that's the only note that I would say. And as I say, the HS Scope is down there. I had Moses come by, XR Studios using our stuff. A lot of people turn around doing that, and it's a Canadian development. And it was just going from there.
Thank you.
So, one of the most important things about television is audio.
Pardon?
That's the projector.
Were there any AI auto mixing for radio, for television, to make audio easier? Because come on, seriously, it's the hardest part about video. Like, you all laugh, but at the same time, like, this show would really suck if there was no audio. So was there anything in that space to make production of audio a little bit easier, and the communication of on-set stuff, right? All your virtual sets still had real people communicating back and forth. Was there anything that stuck out audio-wise that NAB presented?
Nothing? Anyone in the room? Anyone?
This isn't really part of so much an NAB thing, but one of the things that obviously Dante is a commercial audio standard. One of the things the IPMX format will do in mashing all of the AMWA stuff in and creating a control layer in what is essentially the video standard is it's thought that it will breathe new life into AES 67. So AES 67 was a great idea. If at the 2110 standard, taking maybe a different path, mashing that together earlier, it might have had more adoption. But I think new life for AES 67. could come out of this IPMX format, because now that AES 67 will have all that control hooks on it, and it will be more Dante-esque in an open standard. So, and there's a lot of collaboration going back and forth between SMPTE and AES. And then even to the color space, by the way, just to go back to that, the RIS was meant to greatly speed up, and it's a whole different approach to standards, by letting all the practical work happen first, and then converting the results of that into a standard very, very quickly, versus a standard coming out of the community and then going into and then being shown its flaws in the real world, then going back to SMPTE and whatnot. So that was really the side of the purpose of the RIS. It was interesting that we wondered how many of the 90 sponsors of the RIS would renew, and not only did all 90 renew, 30 more were added. So it has been a hugely successful. And by the way, when it comes to virtual production, the biggest question is who's actually buying them, because the movie business doesn't want to buy anything. They want to rent it, if you know the way the tax things work. So this Mr. Reynolds, Ryan, has put his money where his mouth is, so to speak, and he's going to build the sets up in Markham. But and there's a street in Burnaby called Virtual Way that apparently is going to have some 26 studios on it. And still, there's the big question of who's going to actually pay for this, invest in the sets. And there's a lot of risk in it, because one size virtual production set doesn't suit all. And trying to figure out what right size to have for all productions that'll come through the door is a big financial risk, apparently.
I didn't see any audio stuff. I'm sorry. I love audio, but I was distracted by other things.
At NAV, there was this one product that I saw. It was called Radio GPT. I think it was by Futuri, if I'm not mistaken. And it was kind of similar to like Chat GPT, except instead it was like audio based. So basically you could like put into prompt into it. And then like, if you want like, oh, like create, like talk about like the news for this day. And then they would come up with a prompt, and then they would use like AI voice generators. So then like you can listen to it over radio. And I'm not exactly sure about the specifics, but that's definitely a product that I think is pretty interesting. It's audio AI. It's something worth looking into.
We've got one from Cliff at TFO.
He said, for the audio question, MSG Sphere is doing amazing work with HoloPlot.
I knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Something to research. HoloPlot at the MSG Sphere. Silvino?
Yeah, thank you. So great panel. Thank you for collecting all of this. It's a lot of work while you are walking around NAB. So I have a question, and I think touches what Roy was explaining, and Paul, I think you can chime in on this as well. I talked with some of the companies worldwide, right? So these guys are reducing staff, so the broadcasters, the cable companies, etc. And one CTO told me at NAB that they have all the technology. They have the VRs, the lightings, the clouds, etc. And but what they don't have is effectiveness. No, it doesn't work together in the way that the business needed. And I was impressed by I see some of venture capitals that put together the lineup of the production, Phone Group and the other ones you showed that. And I see a lot of new features for current vendors, like the big vendors. They are always adding some features more towards orchestration, automation, etc., trying to automatize things, to automate things. What is your impression on that? How is this going to work? I see SMPTE is fast tracking some standards as well for like OpenConfig and OpenGear, to try to make this a standard for our industry as well, to really help the business process to be able to get efficiency from their process, then literally adding more complexity of new technology, right? So how they survive first what they have. So what you saw and what your thoughts on that?
I'm maybe the guy who knows too much here. The dirty little secret of the industry, obviously, is it continues to consolidate, and people are looking for ways to do that. And the big deal with virtualization, like we talk about cloud, and you know, frankly, it's just virtualization, whether you decide to put it in the cloud or not. But some of the software, everything's being replaced by software. You know, production switchers, routers, everything can now be emulated in software. So especially in a country where you have 5.5 time zones, I always get a laugh from Americans when I say 5.5 time zones. You know, the traditional idea of having a studio per, a control room per studio, it's everybody agrees it's obsolete. So amongst all this virtualization and cloud is the dramatic reduction in staff that can occur when you have virtualized software. At the CH example that I guess we're going to schedule a meeting for, it was in the news that they actually had a bomb threat, a credible bomb threat, and they were able. A guy produced the evening news from his kitchen table with the people in the studio. So when you virtualize, and in their case, they say it actually allowed them, rather than let people go, it actually allowed them. Virtualization basically cut their production, their staff in half. And they said instead of actually letting those people go, now they assign them all to more production. So they just create more content that way. But that is the efficiencies, and the cost pressures on the industry continue. Also the ability to be able to have a software-based platform where you can do integrated multimedia production, where you can, we all agree that television isn't the way people consume most of their content these days. So how do I have one process that makes the 5 or so formats that you need? You need about 5 formats. And if you know, I won't bore you with the story, but if you know how 16:9 came about, it's kind of laughable, to be honest, how it was derived. It was a compromise so that nobody would win. So it was, so concurrent multimedia production and the efficiencies is definitely everything about the cloud.
That was a really good question, Silvino, and you're right. Getting things to work together in the workflow is absolutely key. One very quick detail I heard spoken of is APIs. Often, getting things to work in workflow often involves writing to APIs, and it's time consuming. But someone said writing to an API is the modern day equivalent of putting a BNC connector on a cable in terms of an engineering skill, and I think it's true. There's an initiative there though that I heard of called Open API to make that simpler. And again, the word standardization, to have a standard structure for APIs to make it easier to integrate. And certainly MAM solutions are important. You'd also speak of some of the layoffs. There's certainly, and I touched on it a bit, but the subscription model that some of the large media companies came out with, the revenue structure, there's certainly some adjusting going on there, and now more and more initiatives towards ad-supported content delivery. So I believe some of the layoffs were related to the revenue models on the subscriptions maybe not being as what was expected. So yeah.
Actually, that is one of the biggest trends at NAB in the industry now. A lot of vendors are simply not selling their software anymore. You can't buy it. You have to subscribe to it. And I'll tell you that the VC companies that own those expect to see the 10-year cost of ownership go up 2.7 times versus buying and doing it. And it's getting mixed results, as it is in this crowd.
I think I just want to touch you talked about some of the new subscription and ad supported services. Do you guys think that's going to sufficiently replace the existing model or the legacy models from a business perspective? How do we keep all this content getting produced, all these great shows on television, all this wonderful sports being produced, you know, that's all big business. Is it supportable in some of these new models?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And I think it is if you get the dynamic ad insertion correct, right? If like right now, there may be an ad that airs on a sports event that is relevant to about 10% of the people that receive it, right? If you can then get the model using, whether it's FAST or some sort of streamed OTT, using the internet, getting that dynamic ad insertion right so that relevant ads that appeal to people get to each of those people, then, I mean, just the simple math around that, right? If it's relevant to everybody and everybody's getting the right ad, then you can charge exponentially more, and the revenue could go up. So it's about, in my opinion, it's about executing on that model. So like the worst example, right, is someone turns 50 and all they get is funeral ads, right? So you've immediately given someone an ad that annoys them.
A different diaper ad, not the ones from when you were 25.
Yeah. So if that can be executed, that whole model, then I think that's a rosy picture for revenue in the industry. Yeah.
My question is kind of where we see the future with this. Is I did kind of see a little more NDI stuff and the 2110. And to me, they both have their use cases. But one of the things that seems to be really problematic, and there might be some hardware out there, I just haven't been exposed to it, from taking an NDI stream and putting it in 2110, converting obviously once compressed and those issues. But my most recent example that comes to mind is having to actually take NDI, converting it to SDI, and then converting it to 2110. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but the non-deterministic and bandwidth modeling of NDI has examples for spinning stuff up and down, news gathering where you have an uncontrolled network where you're okay with, you know, a little bit of breakup on a basically still talking head image where, you know, lesser quality isn't ideal, but can sometimes get by, where 2110 is much more hard and rigid. I'm just curious what you guys see the future. I didn't see too many vendors really going into that, and that's question one. And I have a second question to keep our audio friend happy. And I guess I'll just where do we see DNS radio going?
I just want to speak quickly about 2110 when it comes to the virtual production space, that Unreal Engine and 5.2 are implementing it. So it's going to be coming full force to the virtual production space.
Yeah, so NDI doesn't have a time base. It's NTP timing. So it's best effort timing, and sort of the short description of 2110 is RTP, PTP, bound or elementary streams. So interesting you mentioned that, though, because there would be nothing to stop NDI from adopting a time base. But that's the major thing now, is that it is that best effort timing. It isn't internally bound either, so that audio can slip easily from video. And if there's one thing we all hate in basic broadcast, it's lip sync errors. But that is the God bless them. They've come out with something that's just taken much of a market by storm. It is a lower quality with that 125 megabit DCT type compression, first gen MPEG style compression. So something like an IPMX, which will come out asynchronous with no time base originally. And then the subsequent versions of it will come out, because a television set, for example, taking IPMX won't be PTP aware. So it'll be internally timed So that's what I would watch for, is there'll be an alternative. If you see some of the companies that are supporting it, people who want to compete with NDI with an open standard, the IPMX will give you that better quality range, and it will give you the option of being synchronous or PTP timed, asynchronous or PTP timed. Is that even an answer to your question?
And also the question about maybe better metadata interoperability between the two.
Yeah, again, sorry, going back to the IPMX thing, for the AV business, it would allow multiple control systems to be on the same network. So there'll be a control layer that would be accessed. In 2110, if you read the original stuff on it, it does include self-describing APIs. That was one of the visions that's not baked in yet, but that a device can be hooked up, discovered, and then transmit its API to whatever controller is on the network. So that's all, somewhere in the future for that spec.
I think there's a part 2 about radio, future radio. Did you throw that in?
Radio DNS.
Oh,
Do we see it being adopted?
radio DNX?
Yeah. Anyone get a chance to stop by that booth?
I don't know what it is.
It's just basic.
Audio.
We're here to exchange information.
Yeah, there was kind of an interesting booth off to the side that I stumbled upon, and it's basically putting metadata into the stream, much like they already do for song descriptions and stuff, but putting in basically metadata that goes to their own DNS tree, and then from there it just basically forwards to so I think it was using, I can't remember the record, but basically it's using an alias record to point to whatever you wanted, and then from there it would kind of have the ability to go between what you're hearing over the radio, and if it loses signal, it would then basically an IP stream, if it had a 5G source, for example, some type of IP stream that it had. And I'm just curious, see that what that roadmap might potentially look at. And there was some use case for customized radio ads that they were doing.
No. It sounds like you can. It sounds like we've got a great meeting topic for future. I know what you're talking about. I'm not an expert on it. The only radio thing I would point to is that everybody came up with automated visual radio systems, and nobody bought them. Not many people bought them, and now people have given up on them, and now the world wants to buy them. So the idea that you would do radio probably in a vertical format, if you were only going to make one format, because most people who would watch would probably be on a portable device. So that type of thing, we see a market demand for it now in a product shortage for visual radio.
Another question here from the floor.
Yeah, great. Virtual production related, moving fast, different last year compared to this year. Just wondering, any inside scoop on what ways of working are changing, constantly changing? Any inside scoop on, talk about changes in workflow, thoughts about that? And also, it's a creative medium, creative challenges, thoughts, changes. Sort of an open-ended question, just sort of inside thoughts on what people are feeling as this is moving fast, and everyone wants it to work. I mean, it's also some nice problems.
We're actually talking about this outside earlier, and just discussions with people that are in the field. The VAD, which is the virtual art department, and the traditional art department, seems to be, it's kind of standardized now that there's a dialogue that happens between those two departments. But it seems to be that that was a lot of talk of that this year, where it's just like it's a must, where those creative teams need to be in a feedback loop between each other. That was kind of one of the main things that I took back from a bunch of conversations in the workflow, anyways.
something that I selfishly wasn't able to check out while at the show, given I was stuck on my vendor booth. I'm curious if there was anything camera technology that you guys saw that wowed you.
Again, virtual production related, but the ecosystem that Sony showed off was pretty cool. Like specifically for virtual production, they have Virtual Venice, which is like a plugin that is giving basically virtual representation of the Venice, and then being able to send basically all of the Fizz data and tracking data as well. So seeing that ecosystem in the demos that were on the Sony virtual production stage were pretty cool.
The trend away from big cameras to PTZs is overwhelming as far as a market trend. So many studios can be accommodated with PTZs now. We're just seeing a general decline in the use of big cameras.
I wasn't there, any other interesting Unreal Engine stuff, either from themselves or what people are doing?
There was a lot of talk about 5.2. There was a presentation there, and just a lot of compute, basically lower compute needs. Epic Games is really concentrating on kind of optimizing things to can lower our compute needs. And like I mentioned, 2110 is coming, so it also enables us to have multiple GPUs, in our render nodes. And that was like kind of the big one that I took away was 5.2.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Epic plugin because
sure, which one?
I heard a lot about it, and obviously it's game related. I don't know your experience or explanation of it.
Which plugin?
Well, I just kept hearing references to an Epic plugin that a lot of that was available, and that it was something that Epic was licensing to some of the engine makers.
I'm unaware of it, unfortunately.
Oh, we're coming for one more?
I'm gonna have to ask.
Reed's got
some
something
people there.
When will they bring back 4:3 ratio, please?
Stop it.
Stop it. So question, do you think there will be a revolt against the software license model after people get sick and tired of going through iterations of companies who either drop or evaporate into the cloud, so to speak? Do you think there will be a regression towards hardware at a certain point in time, or do you think we're stuck with software and 2.7% annual increases every year into perpetuity? Where do you think we're going?
Oh, there's a revolt happening for sure about it. We've got government clients, for example, that will not allow, like, there's different ways that the models are done. Some of the models, like GV's model, for example, has a billing token in a cloud, and it must be there. So it measures your actual use. It can count your keystrokes, and they can literally license it per use and per minute that you're doing it. So a lot of people won't accept that anything in the cloud, a public cloud. So I would say that's a solid third of the market is clearly revolting about it. And like I say, the whole aspect of the cloud, it's not the perfect solution. So and even the cost models, if something must be in a cloud. So we don't approach it that way in our business. We just say it's virtualized. Where you put it is your business. It's a number of very big companies. I mean, I can mention a few. I mean, Viz, Avid, GV is going to an all as a service. A MAM company almost all the MAM companies now are going. You can only buy it as a service now. Almost all the MAM companies. And you think about it, that's where all your content awareness is stored. You turn off that tap, and it's gone. It's the old thing. If you lose your database, everything that's in a computer is gone. So the industry's trying to reconcile it, and it's a big deal.
Reed, for those at home, Reed Robertson, the legend.
May I just add one
Sorry, yeah,
more?
yeah, Roy.
Because you asked about, are things going to go back to hardware? Yeah. I'll say no. Yeah. I would like to think that pricing models, customers can apply pressure, things will succeed or not succeed, partly because of their pricing models, and I would like to think it'll move towards something that's more acceptable.
Yeah, I think that ship has sailed. My question, enough of the technical stuff. This is supposed to be the centennial of NAB, a century, and I subscribe to the NAB Smart Brief, which is the daily industry newsletter. They hyped the hell out of it about the past 3 or 4 months. And did they do anything? You guys were there, all 5 of you. I wasn't.
They had the number displayed in a lot of places, 100.
But did they actually do anything to celebrate their centennial?
Yeah.
They had a party. They had a big party.
I thought you were about to ask what was going to be shown at the 200th anniversary.
Yeah, I'm retired. I don't care about that now. But I did about 12 NABs in a row, so not as many as Paul, of course. But I just wondered if they actually did anything for it. Just type it.
I got an NAB 100 T-shirt. I mean, that was.
There was some swag at NAB.
Don't know how maybe I could say this, but there was so much concern about the ongoing viability of the show. I think rather than celebrate, everybody was just relieved that it came together and went on. So I think, you know, it's been very hard for the trade shows coming out of the pandemic and the trade show facilities and everything. So I think that was kind of the underlying. We were all sort of holding our breath there for a few months.
I think maybe just to bring it home along that same line, you know, I think having the success of this show, you know, the anticipated success of future shows, people coming back in person, even tonight, we're seeing over 30 people here at TMU, which is fantastic. Because, you know, Laura touched on it, I think you guys all touched on it, the ability to make those personal connections, the ability to learn with your hands on tool sets and to talk to the owners of companies at smaller booths and go find those golden nuggets. Generally, do you foresee any roadblocks to the future here? You know, is it going to get back to the heyday, or is it going to where's it going to go from here?
Oh, about the last question, I was just gonna say, I just got a shirt and a pin that's at 100.
Shirts and pins.
That's good. A good question, Stosh, and I think, well, I think there are challenges, but absolutely the human connection and interaction. I think it was alive at the show, and you could feel everybody had some pent up desire to get out and mingle and meet people. So it was really enjoyable for that. And I think it's going to continue to grow, but there'll always, it's a new world. There'll always be a mix of ways to do things remotely and then some in person.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience in the early days of COVID, we thought we were killing it doing Zoom meetings with clients across the world, doing these hour-long training sessions in lieu of NAB. And it didn't take long to realize the content wasn't being absorbed. You know, 5 minutes face-to-face on a booth with someone with that whatever it is you're talking about right in front of you, the staying power of that versus these Zoom meetings, just, you know, they're the right tool for some things, but they certainly don't replace that in-person experience.
As I mentioned in my presentation, I'd have said that there's no way it's ever going back to where it was. And I was stunned to see how big it was, and stunned to see some of the legacy, the Everts and the Ross, and the Telestreams and whatnot, doubling down on the size of their booths and everything. So I was floored by it. We all gave it up for dead, or at least it had to change dramatically to carry on. But it depends on the budgets. I think it's going to depend on the budgets and new markets. You know, the industry isn't going to survive on broadcast. And film. It's obviously it's the new markets, and I think maybe that's where NAB's had some of their success.
And I was also surprised, kind of coming out of the pandemic and then going to NAB 2022, what you were talking about, that face-to-face time that you have, as opposed to the Zoom time. That was echoed by everybody I talked to there, and I was surprised this year that it did grow even more. It's like I know that this face-to-face time is important, but I feel like being able to connect on Zoom and all these things are valuable. So it's like a kind of a hybrid moment, maybe, where like I feel like it can't get much bigger than it is now, because there's these other things that are fighting against us being able to meet IRL, but it's completely important to do. But these companies need to decide whether they're going to pay for plane tickets, how many staff they're going, and so I think those two things are fighting against each other a bit.
Any final thoughts from the panel? Don't run off just yet. There is some updates from the section that Tony will have for everyone just in a moment. But any final thoughts from our panel?
It'll just be interesting to see where it goes next year. Whether NAB's bet that it's going to grow some more. So again, it continues to surprise a lot of us.
I just have a couple questions.
Sorry.
So I was kind of not really surprised, I guess, but it was still kind of a shock to see that the money of the broadcasters is going to AWS. You could see from the size of their booth, it was gigantic. That was certainly a change from it was a few years ago, obviously. And compare the AWS booth to Imagine, which is 10 by 30. I mean, it's quite a shock in a way. But my question and comments are, maybe there's going to be an API GPT. It's going to self-write APIs. I see that as a distinct possibility. But really, it's to Paul about IPMX. I first came across IPMX about 2.5 years ago, I guess, through contact at Matrox, because they're one of the kind of they're one of the sponsors of IPMX.
Is the one who's writing it. Basically.
Exactly, and I was kind of impressed by what they were doing to try to kind of bring 2110 down to kind of the AV level, the professional AV level. I thought it was, but it just hasn't had the legs that I thought it should have by now. What do you think the challenges are for IPMX?
We'll see what happens at Infocom in 6 weeks or so. I know there are 7 core manufacturers in the AV business who have adopted it. And a lot of other people are looking at it. I think the main thing that they've done is giving, NDI is so wildly popular, but people say, gee, if it was just a little bit better, if it had a little more robust sync. So obviously being able to turn up that dial to visually or even mathematically lossless, JPEG XS at 2:1 is mathematically lossless. At 4:1, it's pretty well visually lossless. So, having that ability to have a more robust and having the quality dial, if you will, at whatever bit rate, and then there'll be a 264 version of it as well. So the thing that they've done is, and what's holding 2110 back has been the fact that 2 organizations are the control layer is done in AMWA and the framework is done at SMPTE. So the fact that they've just said, this is no good, we need to mash this together. And that's what they've done. And that's, I think, the real attraction to it is it's completely fully baked. And that's why I think broadcasters are going to jump all over it, because the number of them that are doing NDI, if you take away if you make it more robust and higher quality, I think that the broadcasters will adopt it.
Now, I understand that TICO became XS, right? And it was developed by Intupix in Belgium.
Intupix. Yeah, for example, Crestron, the control company in the AV business, is a more than $2 billion family company.
Yes.
And their AV product is based on Intupix. It's written by Intupix.
I know that.
So TICO's now been, that was sort of the 4:1 thing. So now TICO's been given a broader, it's really a broader spectrum now.
Well, my question is does Intupix still have a license connection to XS?
No, JPEG XS is an open free standard.
Yes, it is open free standard.
I like your comment about GPT for APIs.
API GPT.
Yeah, and I heard recently, I like the comment that more and more AI is being used to write code. with instructions from humans. So the new programming language is now English, right? And I think there's some truth to that.
All right, well, if we could get a round of applause for our panelists, thank you so much. We have our SMPTE certificates. While Tony gets set to take us home, we'll just hand these out. We will release you guys from the stage. Thank you so much.
For those of you that are virtually at home, you've missed a lot because this room's going to get a makeover over the course of the summer. Hopefully when we come back in September, we'll have brand new chairs. I don't know. We had one chair completely bust open. We've had a projector that wants to sing. So look what you've been missing. Well, I can go ahead while you're trying that, Rick. Just a couple of things that I've got is this meeting is being recorded. It's going to be on the SMPTE channel or YouTube Toronto. Our TTC was delayed. When you registered, we got you to fill in a couple of questions. And the questions around the June meeting that we're looking to have. And again, it's CHCH, it's been mentioned a couple of times, and it's a fully NDI operation. They don't have one video cable in the facility. So the question was, meeting tour barbecue, are you interested? 40 said yes, 36 said no. Scheduled, now the reason why we had to go to a Saturday is because they are very busy through the week from 4 o'clock on till about 9, 10 o'clock at night. So for us to show up at 6:30 to do a tour and things of that nature, right in the middle of their busy time. So that wasn't going to happen, and it couldn't be scheduled. So 40 said we're not interested in Saturdays. 25 said that June the 3rd and June the 10th, 11. Then there was the ride share. So before I get to the bottom one, we are going to go ahead. We're going to get a hold of the Brian at CHCH and say we want to come by. We're going to do it on, and there's going to be more information on this. We'll send this all out. We're going to do it on June the 3rd because it's obviously the bigger number. And we're going to do it at 12 till 1, maybe 2 for the, yeah, we'll have to figure that out because we're not going to do the barbecue, but we are thinking about doing the tour, the meeting, the presentation, and then on a bar stool somewhere and have a drink and a burger or something like that. So we'll send the notice out. Again, you have to register, things of that nature, because we need accurate numbers so that we can get it prepared at the other end as well. So there was a lot of talk about the last comment is, do you intend to start attending SMPTE Toronto in-person section meetings in September? More people said no than yes. And all I heard tonight was networking, networking, networking. And if we listen to everybody that was presenting, Laura being, I want to capture her in a bottle and then give it to everybody. I think it speaks volumes if you can come in person and network. So I want to get 2 more slides. Come on. So yes, so we really want you to, we think there's a benefit in coming. Post-COVID, we used to have 80 people show up. And if you take the 32, Julia? I think there was 32 at one point, virtual, and add the 30 some people here, and we're back to the 60, 70 people. And it's better for the presenters, it's better for the sponsors. So I really want to put a push on in person, if everybody can think about that. The elections have completed, and these are the results. Lawrence, who's sitting right in the middle, he's taking over for me. 1 more for me, many more for him. Craig is going to be the Secretary Treasurer, He's in the house as well. Nora is from AWS. Roy, presented tonight. And Angelique, Bell Media. They're all going to be new managers. And I believe who's leaving is, Stosh is leaving, and I don't know that. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, I thought you were commenting on I forgot the guy. Thank you. Just to put a plug in for Montreal, they're having their boot camp on June the 6th, and it's on Agile production and infrastructure. And the notice suggested that half of it is in French and half of it is in English, but it's in person only, not virtual. Again, a couple of slides that you've seen before. If you want to become a friend or be a SMPTE member, YouTube channel, contact information. I'm skipping through this, and that's it. We are done. Thanks very much, everybody.